On today's show, we'll be interviewing Fruitarian Mango. He's a man who's been vegan since the late 80s and a self-described ethical fruitarian for about the past 15 years. We'll discover what exactly an ethical fruitarian is and how you can try the fruitarian lifestyle to see if it benefits you and your health. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning, Mango. I know it's very early where you are in Australia. We really appreciate it.
That's okay, Brett. It's no problem. We're bright and early this morning. I actually enjoy the mornings. It's always very peaceful before everybody else gets up.
And it's actually summertime over there when we're talking to you, wintertime here. So I'm guessing you're experiencing beautiful weather now over in Australia?
Where we live, actually, we don't really have the four seasons, the four classic seasons that you have where you are. We have two seasons, really. We have a wet and a dry. And we're in the middle of the wet at the moment, which is summertime, yes, I suppose.
Fascinating. I have so much to learn about Australia.
Yeah.
I guess we should start at the very beginning by having you tell us exactly what does being an ethical fruitarian mean?
I guess it's an extension of veganism, where not only do we acknowledge the sentience of animals, we also acknowledge that plants in their own right live and they also do not wish to be harmed. So we try to eat only fruit, grown locally if possible, which is, unlike other plant food, it's actually given karmically freely by the plant. It's the only food which is given without causing any harm. If we pull up a carrot, we are killing the carrot plant. If we eat bacon, we're obviously killing the pig. But fruit is taken from the tree without harm to the tree at all. At least that's the theory. In practice, it doesn't always work that way because of methods of agriculture that are being used all over the globe, which aren't exactly ideal, but at least it's more ideal than many other things that are grown, like monocrops of cereal.
That's a fascinating theory. I don't think I've ever heard that before. So it does make some sense, though, on some level, because the fruit is a product of the plant. So you actually aren't actually eating the plant. You're eating something the plant produces. I'm assuming you started out as a vegan at some point in time before you transitioned to a fruitarian from the start, or was it some kind of a process? Can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming a fruitarian?
It all started for me back in the 1980s. I think it was probably about 1987. But I was at the cinema and I was watching the movie Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It was in any case one of the Indiana Jones movies. And in that movie, Indiana Jones was given a bowl with some kind of grey matter in it for him to eat. It became clear that the bowl that he was given was in fact the skull of a monkey, and the grey soup-like material inside it was actually the brain of the monkey.
Right.
And I can't really explain why, but it grossed me out. It made me think about my own food choices, really probably for the first time in my life. Before I reached my flat, traveling home again after the movie, I had made the decision that I would no longer eat animals. I think it was probably about 6 or 7 months after making that decision, I learnt of what goes on in the dairy industry and how badly chickens are treated in order to steal their eggs. And I decided to go vegan. So that was all in the same year, probably back in either 87 or 88.
So you went from being, I guess, a raw food vegan to eventually you made the path to being a ethical fruitarian, as you refer to yourself today. So let's touch a little bit on the fruitarian lifestyle for our audience in case we're piquing their interest. And of course, everything that somebody might want to know, they're going to need to refer to the books, which we'll talk about later. But maybe we could get a tip of the iceberg, if you will. Just broad strokes. You only eat fruit. You don't supplement with nuts, seeds, or anything of that nature. Your diet is strictly 100% fruit.
That is correct, yes. We don't eat anything other than fruit. Up until 2006, I was eating lettuce and occasional radish. Anyway, since coming to Australia in 2006, I have eaten predominantly only fruit, but it would be a lie for me to say that I've not eaten other things. On occasion, like if I was in the supermarket, I might break off a little sprig of broccoli and eat it, or sometimes if we had guests, I would explain that this plant is edible, and by way of demonstration, I would break off a leaf or two and eat it. But that's something that I ceased doing in 2009 when somebody pointed out the hypocrisy of saying I was eating only fruit, when at the same time I could demonstrate to people that this wild plant is edible and break off a leaf or two. So I kind of have been sticking with only fruit since that time.
I would guess the first probably question our listeners would have would be, do you often have health checkups? Are you assured that you're not deficient in things like B12 and other types of minerals? Do you feel like you're at optimum health living on 100% fruit?
Actually, neither of us make a regular point of going to doctors. We don't take any vitamin supplements or anything like that. Back in 1988 or 89, after having been vegan for 1 or 2 years, I was teaching English to a Hungarian doctor, and she insisted that I'd come into her office and have my blood checked. I thought, okay, I'll go in. She's offering me a free health checkup. And I went in, and she took blood, several vials of it, and had a complete blood spectrum analysis taken. And she noticed that the only one thing which was lower than it should have been was vitamin B12, which she informed me at the time was the lowest that she had ever seen. It was way below what it should have been. I never took any steps to rectify that because I've never experienced in my life any vitamin B12 deficiency symptoms.
How many years ago was it that you were told you had the lowest levels of B12 she'd ever seen? How many years ago was that?
Well, that was in 1980, probably 1989.
Wow. And so you still, since that time, not done anything to supplement with B12, and you've had no B12 deficiency symptoms?
No. So I try to live on faith. I try to live that when I make a choice which I believe is ethically correct, then I don't see why I should run into health problems from making an ethically correct decision. And I really try to steer clear of all talk of carbohydrates and calories and vitamins and minerals and all that.
Well, I'll tell you, I think most of the audience that listens to this show would be vegan, so you have staunch allies in the fact that you probably shouldn't worry about protein and you shouldn't worry about carbohydrates. And I think most of us as vegans, especially if we've been vegan for very long, have come to know that you can get all of that from without having animals or supplements. B12 is the one thing that hangs everybody up. So that's the one I was a little bit interested in. So I think it's fascinating. And I tell you, your resolve to stick with your beliefs is quite remarkable. Let's say there's people listening to the show right now who are interested in trying the fruitarian lifestyle. Let's say they've listened to the show, a normal, typical vegan who may even be raw, or someone who cooks food but is still vegan, into trying fruitarianism. Should you try to eat a wide variety of fruits, or should you stick with just the fruits you like? Or do you have any tips for trying a fruitarian lifestyle?
My belief is that if you put a selection of fruit in front of you and eat that which appeals most, you will probably be getting everything that you need. It's when you start to think about things, well, I need, once more going back to the whole vitamins and everything, if you start to psychoanalyze every piece of fruit, then I think that's when you start to run into difficulty. But if you can just look at it and see, well, this appeals and this tastes good, this smells nice, then go for that. That's the way to eat. I think the one thing you have to bear in mind is that if you to go from one day to the next from eating cooked food, even if it's a simple vegan diet, to eating only fruit, raw fruit, you will notice some differences. In the long term, these differences will be very beneficial. You'll feel much lighter, and you'll feel your energy levels are higher and your concentration levels are higher. But initially, you're going to run into problems because of something called detox. Your diet is going to get lighter, and hence you can quite easily get symptoms where you feel maybe you feel like you've got a headache, or you might have aches and pains somewhere, or you may feel discomfort in the stomach. You may feel even nauseous. These are all symptoms which are quite common if you're to just jump from one day to the next. But having said that, though, Brett, I would like to add that we've had several people that have come and stayed with us in the past. One of the things that we've made absolutely clear before anybody comes to us is that they must eat 100% fruit with us. Otherwise, well, I mean, this is just our home, and we ask people to respect this. So anyway, people have come here and they've gone on a 100% fruit diet. And surprisingly, most of them have managed quite well, and most of them have felt great improvement in their health within a short matter of days. We had one particular fellow here, an old friend of mine, and he was thinking, he didn't know how he would manage eating only fruit. He is himself someone who eats everything, so he's not a vegan but an omnivore. One thing that we noticed, or that he noticed, which he frankly felt was miraculous, was that he had been on blood pressure medication for I think 25 to 30 years. He came to us, he started eating fruit, and he checked his blood pressure, and this was like a day or two after being with us, and he could not believe that his blood pressure was normal. He just could not believe it. And I said, no, trust it. This is a true reading that you're seeing there. I think he went back and checked his blood pressure on a different machine, and it was low. He could not believe it. He came in, the first day he was here, he was snoring like a jet engine. We, sleeping in the bedroom right next to his, we thought, we're never going to get any sleep if we're here for 3 weeks. We're not going to be able to survive this. And this may sound incredible. In fact, it is incredible. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But within 3 days, he'd stopped snoring.
So to summarize your thoughts on trying fruitarianism, or, if you want to give it a 6-week try, 21-day try, people like to do these types of things to see how it makes them feel. Yep. Generally, just whatever fruit appeals to you is what you would eat. And I think a lot of people subscribe to that philosophy. Your body knows what it needs. It kind of instinctively knows what types of different nutrients are in what different types of foods, and so you'll be drawn to probably what your body needs the most. Is I guess the simple way of putting that.
Yeah, you could say that, although you shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking, well, if the body knows what it needs and it feels like it wants pizza, then it should eat pizza. I'm afraid that the philosophy only works if you present your body with a correct choice of foods. If you're presenting your body with burgers and cheese or whatever, then your body can be tricked into thinking that it wants something that it really doesn't.
What is your thoughts on blending in smoothies? Because I know when I ate only fruit, I would start my day with a smoothie. So I wasn't actually eating bananas and mangoes and pineapples. I was blending them up in a smoothie and drinking them. Is that fine? Do you think there's any kind of problem with that? Or what are your thoughts on doing smoothies?
I think there's absolutely no problem with that, Brett. I mean, we tend to drink an awful lot of juices. In fact, we're sort of a borderline liquidarian in many ways. We first meal of the day is a juice that we have 1.5 liters of juice each, my partner and I, and that will be maybe mango, orange, banana smoothie. And then later on in the day, we will have a juice which is made predominantly from cucumbers, tomatoes, and pumpkin at the moment. We're eating a lot of pumpkin, juicing a lot of pumpkin. We have a slow press juicer, which I recommend for everybody, really. It's the best way to juice your food.
So let's talk a little bit about your books. The first of your 2 books, Destination Eden, Fruitarianism Explained. This book has been out for a while. It's in several languages all around the globe. What exactly is the book about, and what will we learn or gain if we added this book to our library?
I think the predominant focus of both of my books actually is about manifesting Eden. I believe that Eden is Earth's true state. My first book goes through every step of where we're currently at. So I talk about omnivorism, vegetarianism, veganism, raw food, and fruitarianism. And I also go into more detail about things like naturism, the importance of getting out in the sunshine, getting the sun on your body as much as possible, walking barefoot. I think that it's a tremendous benefit to one's health to walk barefoot, to not wear shoes. It's just one of the many things in human society that we take for granted is that we need to wear shoes. And we don't realize what an injustice it is to our feet, really, that we walk around with these things, clumpy things on our feet, when we could just as easily be walking around, feeling the heart of the earth coming up through our feet. One thing that I'd like to mention about my second book, it's I like to think of it as a nice resource actually for vegans to ever get into debates with non-vegans. My first chapter is dedicated to answering every single mundane question that non-vegans ever pose against veganism. So they're sort of counter arguments in opposition to veganism. I've listed between 70 and 80 different typical responses that they give, and how you can answer those questions. So I think that's something which a lot of vegans will find quite useful if they ever get into a debate with omnivore.
We have a fan base of a little over 100,000. I have a private vegan group of about 10,000, and I can't tell you how many times every day somebody asks me how to respond to this. Their sister is saying this to them, or their brother is telling them this is going to be bad, or their parents are concerned that this is, if they stay vegan, this is going to happen, and they don't really know how to answer those questions. So a resource like that would be great, especially for new vegans who can, they're new to veganism and they feel a little bit intimidated and maybe they don't know all the answers. I think that would be great for somebody in that position.
I think I've come across pretty much every single question that's posed countering veganism, and I try to address every single one of those issues. And I hope I've done so. And if I haven't, I'd be happy if anybody lets me know and said, look, Mango, you missed out this question, and I will try and add it into a future version of the book if it's not there. But I think that I've done a pretty good job of covering it.
I'll tell you, you're one of the more interesting and fascinating vegans that I've spoken with, and I really appreciate you spending time with me on the show today. Thank you so much for being on the show today and spending time with us. I look forward to, I haven't read your books yet, but I'm actually planning on ordering them and reading them myself, and I'm sure many of our listeners are going to get enjoy from them as well, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you at some point in time in the future.
Thank you very much.